Hi all, I'd like to show you a fantastic game this afternoon played by Andrew Jonathan Mestel. He's a British Grandmaster, not very active at the moment, was active in the 1980s, and he played for England in the 1980 Olympiad. This magnificent game that I want to show you against Nils-Gustaf Renman. So Andrew Jonathan Mestel is actually a professor of applied mathematics at Imperial College London, who works on magnetohydrodynamics and biological fluid dynamics. He holds a Ph.D. on the thesis of magnetic levitation of liquid metals at the University of Cambridge. A distinguished chess player, is also the first person to be awarded the chess Grandmaster titles by FIDE in both over-the-board play and also problem solving. He is also close to Grandmaster strength at contract bridge. So amazing guy. Let's see this game. He kicked off with e4, and his opponent Nils played the French defense, d4, d5, standard stuff so far, knight c3, bishop b4, but here he chooses a slightly offbeat move. The most popular move in the mainline winner is just e5 here, or e takes d is also popular, but knight g e2 was played, so offering a pawn temporarily. Very exciting opening position. Black took, a3, and now the bishop went back to e7. Black wants to preserve the dark squared bishop. Usually black's quite weak on the dark squares in the French defence, so that's an interesting decision. Let black have that white regain the pawn with knight takes e4. After knight f6 we see queen d3, which is the most common move here. Knight bd7, black doesn't want to put the queen in the centre. It could be useful for a battery opportunity later like this with bishop d3 eyeing h7. Also just generally on the king side it could be a nuisance. So now bishop f4. In this particular position though, black is ready to take on e4 here, potentially with knight f6. That is actually quite common here, but black castled now. Now white castled queenside. We see now black playing knight takes e4 in this position. Queen takes, and we'll put on like a bit here. White's done quite well out of the opening. It's quite an interesting opening position. So c5 was played here. Knight c3. Knight f6, kicking the queen somewhere. It actually goes to e1. You might think this is a bit odd. Isn't c takes d just snapping up that pawn? Well, it is, and the best move is played now, not knight b5. In that case, bishop d7 might be quite good. For example, knight takes d4, knight d5. This is quite pleasant for black. Black has a nice position, and that c5 looks to be quite dangerous as well for the king here. So this is quite pleasant, but instead actually we see the knight kept on c3 just with bishop e5 trying to collect that d pawn, and it points also at the king here. We have some things are starting to point at the king. After queen a5, rook takes d4. For the moment black's development is inhibited. If bishop d7 we can just snap off on f6 here to win material. So bishop d7 is inhibited, rook d8 is played, and now very interesting technical exercise here on the queen side first before trying to go on the king side. The move rook a4 is a very annoying forcing move. The queen has very limited squares in this position. It goes to b6, and now we see rook c4, which actually threatens bishop c7. So we see black having to play horrendous looking rook d7, blocking in the bishop voluntarily, and now bishop d3. So we have both bishops now pointing at the king side. So a fantastic result from a kind of offbeat system so far. It's a fantastic position to have from this relatively offbeat method of playing against the French defence. And black's queen side is not developed yet. We see a6, and now a very aggressive move supported by that rook g4. So the rook supporting g4, queen d8, And now g5. Very entertaining and enterprising play from white so far. Knight h5. Rook g1. Black dare not take that pawn with his king there. He plays actually g6. And now rook h4, which looks as though this exchange sacrifice looks quite tempting here, just to follow up with queen e2, and then h7's going to be under fire if white wins h5. So black plays bishop takes g5 check. Was this a blunder of some sort? Check winning the rook. Looks nasty. But this exchange sack now, rook takes g5 is used. After queen takes, now f4. And the queen is protecting the rook with that f4. The bishop's reinforced with the pawn on f4. In this position now, queen e7. And now this exchange sacrifice is played anyway. Rook takes h5 here. This looks too dangerous to take. If g takes, then queen g3 is very, very powerful stuff. Here now, bishop takes h7 threatens mate. The king tries to run, giving queen f8 now as a resource to queen g8. We have knight e4, and this is quite crushing. Queen f8, for example. Queen g1 could be an incisive move, or queen e3, with the idea of knight f6 check, and then coming into b6 could be deadly. This kind of position, it's running out of defensive resources for black. Queen g1, and we have a very, very strong attack on our hands here. So more than enough for sacrificing the exchanges. Black's queen side is just helpless there, just looking on as this attack plays out. So this kind of menacing attack would just be devastating. So basically, after rook takes h5, this cannot be taken. It will have dire consequences. Black plays now f6, and it looks as though that's a terrible concession, but what does actually white do now to continue the attack? Plays actually queen g1. An alternative might have been queen g3 here, which might be a slight improvement, potentially according to engines. But queen g1, pinning that pawn for a moment. Rook takes d3. Very, very good move from black here. Rook takes d3. If f takes e, then bishop takes g6. The bishop was about to use itself to smash black's king side up. This is just too dangerous, this position, because of queen e8 check. It's winning the queen like this, and that's not very nice. So very, very powerful move from black. Rook takes d3. Is black turning the tables here? C takes, and now taking that bishop on e5. Has white been munched up? Well, it's actually okay on material still, this position. White is actually not material down, it's just material is equal. 5 pawns each, rook and knight, rook and bishop. So now we see queen g7, okay, unpinning, so the rook is now threatened. Rook g5, bishop d7. Now knight e4, the knight's threatening to come to f6, and it's difficult to stop that. That is a horrible dark square weakness. So white has got something after all. It looks as though it's an easier to play position, but technically the engines have it as a not too much of a big deal for white, even though this looks like a menace. Bishop b5 now, hitting d3. Knight f6 check, king h8. Queen e3 protecting the d3 pawn, but now black is on the counter attack. Black plays queen c7. Now here, apparently there's a strong move here which may have been missed. White defended, tried to defend the c2 square and inviting, okay, so not inviting queen c2 check, but actually queen h3 is very, very interesting in this position. If h5, we can just snap that off, and this is a very, very good attack. It's actually a mate in 5 after queen g8, queen g7, and then queen f8. That's the forced mate. So it seems that queen h3 is very, very dangerous. The queen c2 check here is pretty harmless. There's only a token check here, and then white can actually play queen b3 there. So queen c2 is actually not not that harmful. So what would black actually play here? It's difficult. If he has to play defensive move, then rook g3 and white's better. But actually white maybe slipped up a little bit with rook g2, a little bit, but still has this dominating knight on f6, and he's preparing what seems to be an entirely logical idea to go into h6, potentially. Still keeping an eye on c1 from h6. Black, though, plays queen g7. Sorry, not queen g7. Queen c6 is played here. Rook f2, so rook moving out of the way. Check, king a2. And now rook c1. This looks a little bit on the dangerous side. This check here could lead to some horrible things. So does white want to take the plunge to h6? Well, the queen has abandoned that. This is quite committal for black. He's relying on rook a1 check really doing some damage to white. If we just rewind just for a moment before getting into this, this was difficult to parry. If black did actually play queen g7, then rook g3, and white is threatening rook h3, so that starts to build up an attack which is actually quite difficult to defend against without potentially sacrificing the exchange with something like this at some point. So okay, so this is quite a committal continuation that black's gone into. We see queen h6, so it's do or die. Is black going to get mate, or is his checks going to lead to something? A fantastic do or die position. Rook a1 check, king b3. A little bit scary for the white king, you might ask. Queen d1 check. You haven't seen anything yet. Now if rook c2, this is not too hot here. Queen takes d3 is quite crushing. If rook c3, bishop a4 check is vicious, because king takes, we have queen b5 mate. So that's how vicious it can be with one inaccurate move. It could be all over here. So white has to play king b4. And now it still looks mega dangerous. Queen a4 check, king c5. Rook c1 check is dangerous here. But also b6 check looks dangerous. Okay, but the queen covers c1, so that's only for a queen decoy, which could be useful. It's covered at the moment, so that's why perhaps b6 check was chosen instead. Now, if king takes b6, then this could actually be okay, but that wasn't played. But actually, the king played an even more accurate little step. Pardon me. The more accurate little step might have been king d6 in this position. Apparently white can get away with king d6, even though it looks really scary. But white actually played king takes b6, and this is still okay. White's got this imminent threat of mate. The checks might be running out here. Queen d4 check, king b7. And now black tries to get the rook back in with tempo by playing bishop c6 check to offer the rook, but the queen's always guarding c1 for the moment. White now took this bishop. If he plays something like king c7, then queen takes e5 check is potentially quite dangerous. It's all potentially quite dangerous. White took the bishop. Check, king d6. Check, king takes e6. Check, king d5. Check, king d4. King's coming back a bit. Queen b6 check, king e4, allowing even rook e1 check here. But now the king finds safe haven, it seems, on f3 for the moment. And the important thing about f3 is that after check here, knight e4. And white's got a huge advantage here. He's actually threatening mate in 1. And it's difficult for black to continue in this position a piece down. The king has found safety. So if king g8 stopped the mate, then king g2 is again renewing the threat of mating. So anyway, but black's a piece down. So black had actually resigned after knight e4. I thought that was quite an entertaining game. And it was actually got the best game prize of the 1980 Malta Olympiad. This was an Olympiad which Kasparov is Kasparov's first Olympiad. I was originally going to show you Kasparov's game, which I still might do, but this game caught my attention, hence I'm showing you this first. Hope you enjoyed it. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.